My name is Thomas Cullinan. I'm the director of this show, The Big Bucks. I'm the producing director for that Epitaph Theater Company. At this time, it gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce both the actor, David Hansen, and the writer of the piece, and also Toni Thayer Hansen, and her daughter, and Dave's daughter, Zelda. The purpose of this talkback is to ask any questions about the piece, about the theatrical presentation, or the issues involved in it. So, if there are any questions? There's a question over there.
When did you write the play? Did you feel
Yeah. Excellent question. Yes, I still do. I mean, it's so in a number of different ways. I mean, it's the worst tragedy of my life, and to perform it. I mean, this is what I do: acting, or writing, or being involved in theater. So I guess it seemed kind of natural to do it, but at the same time, sometimes it seemed kind of strange. I've never written anything so horribly autobiographical, and the idea of performing it's schizophrenic. I mean, I'm acting as an actor up here. I feel like I'm pretending emotions that I'm not necessarily feeling while I'm performing them. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It is very strange. The way I get past that is the way I rationalize it is writing it was the really emotionally difficult part. This is just physically difficult. So I kind of separated the two.
when did you do it?
Probably too soon. I can't remember who it was. Someone after the reading in August, Faye Sheldon, thank you. Faye Sheldon had said traditionally you have to wait like 10 years before tackling a personal tragedy like this, and I did it within less than a year. It was Toni had a play at the New York International Fringe Festival in 2001. So just like 5 months after we lost Calvin. And I saw so many shows. I was just there as a techie, and so I got to have a lot more fun. And I saw a lot of solo performances. And really, on the drive home, I was doing a lot of driving, I was doing a lot of thinking, and I started thinking, oh, you're going to make a show out of this, aren't you? And I promised myself that I wouldn't start writing it until at least January. So I just kind of thought about it, and I started writing it in January 2002. And I finished it within a couple of months. And maybe it was too soon. The thing about it is I don't think I could write it now. Because I was feeling things at the time, which the play reminds me that I was feeling at the time, which would be very difficult to connect to now.
In regards to the last comment you just made about you don't feel now you'd be able to write what you wrote then.
Yeah.
And then seeing it, I always wonder, did you want to talk about it more? Or did you want people to ask you more questions? After doing this yourself, how do you feel about that? In regards to, you went to London and you felt, everybody wanted to ask you questions and you really wanted to talk about it.
Yeah.
And what do you think stopped you from just talking about it in general instead of waiting for people to ask you questions?
Oh,
it's just like there's some kind of...
Yeah, tell me what it is.
It's a very complex question.
Yeah.
Because it's very isolating to experience a tragedy like this. I mean, it's isolating to experience any tragedy. I wouldn't compare what we've been through to what other people go through. But to lose a child, it's not something that's supposed to happen. And it's extremely disorienting and very isolating because people don't understand what you've gone through, and you feel alien, and it's very difficult to just start talking about it, even if that's what you want to do. Partly because, for me, because I was so aware that other people were uncomfortable, that it was upsetting to them, and one of the scenes in the play is called "The Terrible Silence," and that's how it feels. And so one of the things that we wanted more than anything was for other people to show us that it was okay to talk about it by asking us. What's unfortunate about that is so many people want us to show them that it's okay to talk about it because they're afraid of doing the wrong thing. So it leaves people at sort of an impasse, you know. So
Yeah, I mean, speaking self-consciously, I mean, it's funny. I assume that people don't want to ask because they're afraid of making us feel bad, like as if we aren't already thinking about it all the time. So if they bring the subject up, it'll make everything sad, and then they'll be a bad person for having brought it up. Except it works both ways, which is we want to talk about it, but socially, you know, maybe we don't want to bring it up because we don't want to bring the whole party down, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we get stuck. Yeah.
Did you find that other males especially were not allowing you to have feelings? They would say like, how's Toni? And never, how are you?
Sure. And I was warned about that. You know, they're nowadays they're pretty good in the hospital and stuff like that. You know, counseling and things. So I was aware of the kind of things that I would be in for. Certainly, yeah. Everyone asks how Toni's doing and how she's coping. But I did the same thing, because often people would ask how we were doing, and I'll go, Toni's getting along, Toni's fine, but she's not doing too good, she's not doing whatever, you know. And people would be pressing me, but later I'd go, wow, I just totally did not acknowledge how I was doing, you know. So it's not just that men either don't show as much of an interest or don't show the same interest, but it's the fact that I, you know, talking about it was a struggle for me. I could have just gone along with it and been, you know, part of the flow. It's, you know, we always talk about this. It's something that didn't happen. You know, to get into it, but yeah, it's tough for us.
Nice job, Dave.
Thank you, Dave.
When people are faced with mortality, whether it's their own or someone close to them, they'll often find religion. I don't know where you stand these days with that. Did you find any kind of religion or spirituality in the wake of all this?
That's hard to say. I can't say a concrete yes, but I can't say no either. My spirituality is kind of, it's something I'm still working on. Yeah, I don't know how to answer that question, other than to say yes, it has definitely changed. I've given thoughts to what the spirit is, you know, what a person is, more than I had in a very long time. You know, because when I think of Calvin, I think of him as some person, I mean something, some entity, something that is either watches over us or, you know, is kind of present when we're all together. And that's its own form of spirituality, but it's not, you know, it's not formal. I'm sorry, that's again.
No.
Yeah.
I definitely did.
Yeah. Yes.
Not Christianity. I started doing yoga when I was pregnant with Colin, and since his death, that's become very important to me, spiritually as well as physically. One of the main principles of yoga is that we are all divine, and that really resonated for me after this experience. And even in the immediate days after he was born, partly I think because I faced my own mortality for the first time, not just because he was dead, but because I saw very concretely that I could die. Also, getting out of the hospital, seeing the sky again, eating food, I mean everything was a religious experience for me, quite literally, but that's not an exaggeration. In the deepest part of my grief, I was also so overwhelmingly thankful for all the small things that I had. Sorry.
There's a question up there.
Wait, did writing and like performing this piece like make you feel better and be able to cope more with the situation? Did it hurt some?
Some of it definitely hurt. Some of it was difficult to write, mostly because some of it was just like, I can't write this. This is too big. And that's why I wrote it in little tiny pieces. You know, like here's a thing, here's a moment. I just want to write it and just get to it as short as possible. Just get to the point of it. But just the experience of, I mean, like it was something that I had to write about. So yes, it was very definitely a release. Just the fact that I was able to express these things that I've been thinking and try to express them in a concrete way that I would then be able to communicate to an audience. You know, theoretically thinking, I mean, when I first wrote it, I'm like, I didn't know if this was going to be watchable, if it was just going to be dreadful, if it was just going to be theater for therapy, or, you know, you know what I mean, whether or not it was a play, whether or not it was entertainment, you know, which you can watch it and enjoy it and get something out of it, rather than just go, oh, there's a sad man, nice play, Dave. We're here for you, but, you know, well, I mean, if it was that bad, I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have come this far. But yeah, writing it and now having the opportunity to share it with people. Goodness knows, just today I had this big long conversation with my father that was just, if nothing else, indicative of how far we have all come. My entire family has come. The unfortunate thing about this play is that it stops at a particular point in time, and believe me, my family and I have progressed since then. Some of us more than others, but just watching the show last night, it brought up so many conversations in the last 24 hours. It's just wonderful.
All the way in the last row back there?
I just can share the experience of how you made a decision, you know, to have another child and the anxiety you went through up to having this child. I mean, that had to be, I just can't imagine that.
I'm sorry, what?
Experience of having another child.
Deciding to have a decision.
Yeah,
This pregnancy was
Yeah.
the hardest thing I've ever done,
yeah, it was, yeah.
without a doubt. Being pregnant with Zelda was harder than grieving for Calvin in a way. Because grieving for Calvin was something that was unavoidable. It was already determined once it started. And being pregnant with her was opening ourselves up to danger all over.
Did you consciously make a decision to get pregnant again?
Yeah.
You did.
I don't think that was ever a question even when we were in the hospital. You know, I don't know, we talked about it. I mean, there was no point in thinking that far ahead, but
We waited a whole year to try again.
yeah.
Which actually was my grandmother's advice. She suggested that we should see all 4 seasons change before looking forward again in that way. I know a lot of people, I've encountered a lot of people who have lost children since this happened. And there are a lot of people who very much want to get pregnant again right away. And I think for some people that's probably the right thing to do, and I think sometimes that's trying to compensate for the loss right away. I mean, I'm not judging anyone in particular, but
No, in spite of the fact that we talked about waiting a year, when Toni went back on birth control, in the intervening time, I cried because it was making a firm decision not to be pregnant again. I wanted to have a child. You know, I wanted to be in the process of that, no matter how difficult it was. So that was kind of a surprise. Yeah. I think your grandmother's, I forget, but I reminded, just the idea of going through all the different seasons was something that was quite in the back of my head when I put together the show, and it was a year long. But the idea of going through the whole course of 1 year was important.
We'll take 2 more questions. Right here. And
Great.
Who was Calvin named after?
my grandfather, Calvin is my grandfather's name.
Baker is my mother's maiden name. It's also my brother Danny's middle name. Yeah, sure.
In the article in the Plain Dealer, you said that Zelda had changed this experience for you. What was the biggest way that her arrival changed this play?
She softened a couple things, and really, when I say I can't point to them, I can point to some of them. In some cases, she didn't change the lines; she changed the way I delivered them. Maybe if I went over it, I'd go, oh, there's one, or there's another one. I started lightening up a bit on some of the characters who I think I'm rather harsh to. I don't mind being harsh to them in the course of this play because I'm just being honest about how I felt at the time. It's kind of embarrassing to admit, but there they are. But yeah, she just kind of softened the edges. I know, I've been asked that, I was asked it on the radio yesterday, and I really want a better answer than that. I don't have one.
It's okay.
Thank you.
Right down on the sheet.
You're only one.
Only one question.
Was it obvious that you were using things so autobiographical to the beginning, or did you get any not to be non-fictional? The second is more personal, which is, have you made any decisions about, or do you have thoughts about how you're going to continue to your life and your family
The first is simple. I always intended it to be strictly autobiographical, which doesn't mean I didn't fudge some of the facts, but because it's theater. No, but I figured the idea was it would be me performing me on stage, and that would be the risk. I think trying to turn it into another story would just be a bit later or something. Calvin, we just have. My mother has expressed a certain amount of concern when we have had conversations about it, that we're going to make Zelda feel bad. To know that she has a dead older brother. That she has this older brother who's perfect, and who we think about, who we think fondly of, and kind of put on a pedestal. Except that's not just the actor. That's not the way we think about him. That's not the way he's going to fit into our lives. He's just there. He's so present in our house anyway, through just totems or pieces of art or things that are significant to us. We incorporate him into most holidays in ways that seem appropriate because we want to remember him. And someday Zelda will have to come to, we'll explain it a little more in detail. And we have known people who've had, discovered that they had elder siblings that they didn't know about, or always knew about them, and they haven't, people we've talked to haven't expressed any kind of distress over that. So it seems like it's gonna work. He's just always gonna be there, and so she'll learn that we were expecting this boy and we lost him.
And we celebrate his birthday every year. We've only done it once, but we plan to celebrate every year to make a cake. And as long as we're in Cleveland, to decorate the brick, which is actually in front of the Gordon Square Theater right up the bottom. So that's great.
During all of this time, during the pregnancy or about that, you're still, how many people said, oh, you can always have enough?
Did anyone say it in particular?
I don't remember actually having those words said to me. I was warned that people might say that. But I think people implied that several times, not quite that directly. But there's always the future of those kinds of things.
Yeah. It's not that hope was entirely absent. It's just that there's a time for grieving, and then there's a time for looking forward. And when we were in the midst of our grief, we would not be allowed to be told to be positive. And I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with that now. It may seem harsh because some people just want to be positive, but sometimes it's a matter of wading through the negative before you.
Well, my experience is that people who say that lack a certain measure of understanding about a person because who has a dead child.
Well, it implies that you can replace that child. It implies that you can replace that child.
Yeah, and you say, the response is, but I wanted this one. I just wanted
Great. Thank you all very much